She walked in alone. Calm. Focused. Just another black woman with a file in her hand. And a story they didn't want to hear. They smirked. Dismissed her. Laughed right in her face. But what they didn't know, what no one in that precinct bothered to ask, was that she wasn't just filing a complaint. She was investigating one. And by the time they looked up from their chuckles, the badge she placed on the desk would silence the entire room. Because she wasn't here for help. She was the help. And the storm she brought was federal. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing out the Georgia heat and drawing in the dull hum of fluorescent lights. The air inside was cool but stale. Too many years of old coffee, sweat, and the kind of conversations that never made it to a report. The precinct lobby was quiet. Worn linoleum floors, cracked plastic chairs, a community board cluttered with faded flyers, missing pets, free CPR classes, a chilly cook-off from 2 months ago. Maria James stood just inside the threshold. No uniform, no flash, just dark jeans, a grey blouse, a leather file folder tucked neatly under one arm. Her hair was pulled back, simple and sharp, like the rest of her. She moved with the posture of someone who didn't need to prove herself, only be heard. Behind the front desk, a heavy-set sergeant sat slouched in a creaking chair, half watching something on a muted monitor. He looked up just long enough to scan her face, her clothes, and then returned to his screen. "Help you?" he asked, voice flat, bored. Maria nodded once. "I'd like to file a complaint, something I witnessed." The words barely finished before another voice chimed in from the side. Lena, younger, lounging against the filing cabinet with a smirk already forming. "Let me guess," he said. "You lost your dog." A snort followed. The older sergeant chuckled without looking at her. "Might want to try animal control, ma'am. We handle real cases here." Maria didn't react. No raised eyebrow, no flinch, just a steady look that landed like a pause button. "I witnessed something," she repeated, this time slower. "I have names, times, locations." She held up the folder, inching it forward. Neither man reached for it. Instead, the younger one gave her a once-over. "Lady, we get 5 of these a week. Somebody thinks their neighbor's dealing weed. Somebody's mad their cousin's car got towed. Not our job to chase shadows." Still no anger from her. Just silence, and the folder, still in her hand. "I'd like to speak to someone in charge," she said. The sergeant leaned back, finally taking a sip of lukewarm coffee from a stained styrofoam cup. "Yeah? Well, he's busy." A pause. "You can fill out a form. We'll get to it when we can." Maria's voice didn't rise. "I'd prefer to speak in person." The younger cop gave her a mock salute. "Ooh, formal. Should we roll out the red carpet too?" They laughed again, low, familiar, dismissive. Maria didn't. She lowered the folder onto the counter with quiet precision. No drama, no sound, just presence. The room didn't know it yet, but it had already shifted. The folder stayed on the counter, untouched. Maria stood with both hands relaxed at her sides, posture straight, eyes calm. "I'd like to speak to someone in charge," she said again. Her voice even deferred, neither pleading nor forceful, just certain. The older sergeant leaned back with a slow creak of old leather and bone. He didn't reach for the folder, didn't ask what was inside. Instead, he glanced toward the clock like he had something better to be doing. "You can fill out a form," he said. "Or call the tip line. That's how we do it here." Behind him, the younger officer chuckled, still leaning, still watching like a man at a matinee. "She wants the VIP experience," he muttered. "Maybe we should roll out the brass band." Maria didn't blink. "This isn't a tip." The sergeant gave a short sigh, like a man halfway through a meal he didn't order. "Then make an appointment. Maybe next week. Lieutenant's not here, anyway." "I can wait." That earned her a look, not a respectful one, more like annoyance wrapped in suspicion. The younger officer unfolded his arms. "You people always got something to report." The words hung there. The pause after "you" wasn't long, but it was long enough. Maria's eyes didn't leave him. She let the silence stretch. Not confrontational, just present, heavy, like she was watching a tape play out for the 3rd time. The sergeant waved a hand. "Look, ma'am, we get folks in here every day with a story. Something they think is suspicious. Usually turns out it's just 2 neighbors fighting over fence lines, or some kid on a dirt bike." He looked at her then for real, and the look said everything. I've already decided what kind of story this is. I've been in law enforcement 17 years, Maria said softly. I know what a complaint looks like. And I know what gets ignored. The sergeant's brow twitched, just slightly. Is that so? She nodded once. Yes, and I think someone higher up will want to see this. She gestured to the folder. Still no one touched it. The younger officer leaned forward now, elbows on the desk. You a lawyer or something? No. No, journalist. No. Then why so formal? Maria didn't answer. Not yet. She just waited. Waited like someone who knew exactly how this would go, right up until the moment it didn't. Maria took a slow breath. Not to calm herself, but to be precise. There's been movement at the old impound lot off Turner Street, she said. Unlogged vehicles, unofficial entries, property tags that don't match the database. I've seen officers dropping by after hours. No lights. No paperwork. Same ones tied to past dismissed complaints. She said it all clearly. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just facts, lined up like evidence. The sergeant raised one eyebrow, unimpressed. Impound lot, Maria nodded, and several 911 calls from that block never made it to dispatch records. Complaints marked resolved with no reports filed. This isn't a coincidence. Behind her, a chair squeaked as another officer from the hallway leaned in, catching the last part. The young one behind the desk whistled low. Well damn, he said. She's got a whole Netflix series. More laughter. Maria stayed still. The sergeant rubbed his face. Lady, I don't know what you think you saw, but that's not how this works. Officers use that lot all the time. You're probably just seeing shifts overlap. No, Maria replied. I'm seeing patterns. The same badge numbers involved in stops that mysteriously go unrecorded. Complaints logged, and then deleted. The hallway officer snorted. Sounds like someone's been watching too much CSI. Another ripple of laughter. One tossed his paper coffee cup toward the trash, and missed. No one picked it up. Maria didn't smile. She didn't scowl either. She just looked at them, like she was watching something already doomed. The sergeant leaned forward, the desk creaking under his weight. You got some kind of personal beef with someone here, ex-boyfriend wearing the badge. Or maybe you just get your kicks stirring up trouble. Maria's voice remained flat. You're not taking this seriously. You're damn right I'm not, he snapped. You come in here out of nowhere, with no ID, no name, just some folder full of guesses. They're not guesses. He ignored her. And expect us to roll out the damn red carpet. You know how many people walk through that door every week, thinking they've cracked some big conspiracy. 17, she said quietly. That's how many complaints this precinct has dismissed in the last 2 months without documentation. Want the names? He stared at her now, the amusement fading just a little. But it was too late. From down the hall, someone laughed again. The kind of laugh that wasn't about humor. It was about dismissal, about routine. Maria's eyes stayed on the sergeant, and for the first time, his didn't stay on hers. Maria reached into her bag and pulled out a single manila envelope. No rush, no emphasis. She placed it on the counter like it weighed nothing, but everything. The laughter behind her faded slightly, curiosity creeping in, like a draft under a door. The sergeant stared at the envelope, suspicious but unmoved. What's this? He muttered. Proof, she said quietly. He sighed like it was a chore, reached for it with the kind of indifference reserved for paperwork that wouldn't matter. The flap opened. He pulled out the contents. 5 photographs, printed on matte paper. Some were grainy. Most were time-stamped. Each had something too specific to ignore. First image. The back lot at dusk. A patrol car parked behind the chain-link fence. No dash-cam light. No emergency calls logged that night. Second, a man in uniform, one of theirs, stepping out of the cruiser with an unmarked duffel bag. No body cam. Third, the same officer, exchanging a small envelope with a man in plain clothes. No words, just the silent handoff. Their faces partially turned, still unmistakable. The sergeant slowed. Fourth photo, the officer walking away, but not toward the station, toward the dark alley behind it. Fifth, a zoomed-in timestamp. The same hour that a stolen vehicle report had been quietly dismissed with no follow-up. He stopped flipping. For a moment, nothing moved in the room. Maria didn't speak. She didn't need to. The sergeant's fingers twitched slightly, still holding the last photo. His jaw clenched. His eyes traced over the image again, slower this time, like he was hoping it would blur. It didn't. From behind him, the younger officer asked, "What, you find Bigfoot in there?" The sergeant didn't answer. Maria waited. She wasn't watching the photos. She was watching him. The way his shoulders stiffened, the way his eyes darted, not just to the image, but to the hallway behind him. The unspoken math of proximity, guilt, and exposure. "You recognize him," she said. It wasn't a question. He said nothing, but his silence filled the room louder than any denial. The envelope sat open on the counter, the photos still in his hand, and for the first time since she walked through those doors, no one was laughing. The sergeant's thumb hovered over the edge of the last photo, pressing into the paper like he wanted to erase it by force. His expression changed, less smug now, more calculating, eyes sharp, jaw set. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, voice lower. The folder was still open on the counter. The other photos sat exposed under the harsh white light. Maria didn't answer. He looked up. "I said, who gave you this?" She met his stare without blinking. "Can I speak to someone in charge?" The question wasn't a request anymore. Something in her tone landed different this time, like a shift in air pressure right before a storm breaks. The room didn't feel the same. From the hallway, the background noise had gone quiet. No more chuckling, no more side comments, just the low hum of lights, and the faint buzz of a vending machine trying to hold on to life. Behind Maria, a young officer paused at the edge of the room, early 20s, still fresh, his uniform crisp, his posture less confident. He wasn't laughing, wasn't moving, just watching. He looked at the photos, then at the sergeant, then at her. The sergeant cleared his throat, tried to sound annoyed, but it came out stiff. "Ma'am, you need to tell me where this came from. If you're carrying around illegally obtained surveillance." "I asked for a supervisor," she repeated. Same words, different weight. The rookie shifted his stance slightly, just enough to notice. No one told him to leave. He didn't. Maria turned her head slightly, caught his eye. Not for long, just enough. The sergeant stepped back from the counter like he needed space to think. The envelope was still in his hand, but now it looked heavier. His glance toward the hallway was quick, almost instinctual toward the back offices, the locked doors. Maria let the silence settle, not aggressive, just steady. She wasn't pressing him. She was letting him unravel. "Listen," he said finally, voice sharp again. "If this is some kind of setup, it isn't. Then you need to start talking." "No," she said. Calm, firm. "You do." She pointed, not with her finger, but with her presence back to the photographs, still sitting between them. The rookie took one hesitant step closer, still nothing from the others. The air felt tighter now, like something unspoken was finally being heard. The sergeant didn't move, and Maria didn't fill the silence. She let it stretch, because that's where the truth lives, in what they don't say when they're finally afraid to lie. Maria reached into the inner pocket of her jacket, smooth, unrushed. She didn't make a speech, didn't look around to check who was watching. She simply pulled out a leather ID case, flipped it open, and set it gently on the counter beside the photos. The gold badge caught the overhead light. The nameplate below it was clear: United States Marshal Maria L. James. No one said a word. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was hollow, like someone had sucked the air out of the room and left behind the weight. The sergeant's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. His eyes dropped to the badge, then back to her face, trying to match what he saw with what he thought he knew. It didn't fit. Behind her, the younger officer who'd cracked jokes earlier suddenly stood straighter. The smirk was gone. So was the slouch. "Ma'am," he started, voice brittle. "We didn't realize." Maria didn't acknowledge it. She didn't have to. The badge had already spoken louder than any apology would. From the hallway, the rookie stepped fully into view now. He looked at her, then down at the ID, then back again. His face said what the others couldn't. Something's wrong here, and she's not the one to worry about. The sergeant shifted awkwardly, still holding the manila envelope, like it might catch fire. We get walk-ins all the time. Sometimes things slip through. You should have said who you were." Maria's voice was steady. "I did." A long pause. No one moved. Somewhere in the back, A phone rang. No one answered it. The young officer who had been leaning against the wall slowly backed away, like distance could erase his words from 10 minutes ago. The one who'd said you people always got something to report. He couldn't meet her eyes now. Maria closed the badge case with a soft snap. Let it sit on the counter. I came in plain clothes for a reason, she said, her tone even. I needed to see how seriously you take the people who walk through this door. She glanced at the photos again. Now, I know. The sergeant nodded, but it wasn't agreement. It was surrender. Outside, the sound of tires crunching gravel drifted in. Heavy vehicles, more than one, black silhouettes pulling into position. No sirens, just timing, and the weight of a room that finally understood. She hadn't come to report a problem. She was the investigation. Maria leaned in, not far, just enough for her voice to cut through the room like ice. You weren't supposed to, she said, quiet and cold. That was the test. She tapped the side of her watch. No flourish, no warning. Outside, tires crunched gravel in slow unison. Then the unmistakable low rumble of engines, shifting into park. The sergeant turned toward the door just as 3 black Suburbans pulled up to the curb. No lights, no sirens, just presence. Doors opened in rhythm. Boots hit pavement. Suits and vests stepped out. Federal agents, clipped badges, calm faces. Movement, like clockwork. Inside, no one moved. The lobby felt smaller now, shrinking under fluorescent lights that suddenly felt too bright. The front doors opened, both of them, in sync. 6 agents entered. Neutral expressions, gloves already on. A woman with braided hair and a tablet led the way, walking past Maria without breaking stride. Another scanned the lobby, then nodded once toward the hallway. U.S. Marshals, the lead agent called out, voice even. We have a federal warrant for full internal review of precinct activity and evidence handling procedures. The words landed like a crack in glass. The younger officer took a step back. The one who'd joked about Girl Scout cookies earlier. His hand twitched toward his belt, then stopped halfway. The sergeant didn't speak, didn't blink, just stood there, fingers still clutched around the envelope like it might shield him. Maria said nothing. She stepped back as agents moved in, systematic, silent, practiced. One agent peeled off toward the records room. Another moved to the computer terminals. The woman with the tablet approached the desk. Name? She asked the sergeant, already opening the digital file. He stammered. Sergeant Miles Cooper. She nodded once. You'll need to come with me. Please don't touch anything further. Maria watched it all with the same stillness she'd entered with. No celebration, no gloating, just confirmation. Because the investigation hadn't started with her walking through the doors. It had started weeks ago, in shadows, in whispers, in missing paperwork and muffled complaints. Today wasn't the beginning. It was the trigger. From the hallway, a door slammed. 2 more officers appeared. Confused. One started to speak, then froze at the sight of the badge-laden agents combing through the report logs. Maria turned, eyes scanning the room one last time. They hadn't listened. They hadn't cared. And now it was too late to pretend. The precinct wasn't under review anymore. It was under arrest. Maria didn't wait for an escort. She moved through the building like she already knew the layout. Because she did. Down the narrow hall, past the locker room, past the bulletin board covered in photos and birthday notices, and a thin layer of dust. Her boots echoed across scuffed tile, as officers were quietly ushered from desks, hands raised, eyes wide. Some protested. Most didn't. She reached the door at the end of the hall. Evidence locker, authorized personnel only. A federal tech had already bypassed the lock. The heavy door stood ajar, its frame lined with silent judgment. Inside the lights buzzed on, cold and sterile, rows of metal shelves, bags tagged and boxed, some labeled, some not, and in the middle, 2 folding tables pushed together, covered in case materials that had never been entered into the official logs, stacks of documents, photos, property tags, sealed bags without ID numbers, a dusty laptop half buried under a clipboard, all of it out of place, all of it out of sight. Until now, a forensic team was already working, gloves on, cameras clicking, a whiteboard scrawled with initials and dates filled with red circles. Maria approached slowly, her eyes scanning the evidence, then narrowing. Half the case folders were marked non-pursuable. Some bore the handwritten initials of supervisors. Others had no cover sheets at all. But the contents were damning. Arrest reports with missing signatures, surveillance photos never filed, confiscated items never returned. One bag held a pair of cufflinks, engraved expensive, still logged under a case ID that didn't exist. Another held a folded hoodie stained at the collar. No name, no incident report, just a slip of paper with the word trespasser written in ballpoint ink. Maria picked up one of the folders. Victim, Jamal Reed. Complaint, excessive force wrongful search. Outcome, dismissed, insufficient evidence. But here, in her hands, was the body cam still, time-stamped, clear, the officer's face visible, so was the knee on the boy's back. She didn't say a word. Behind her, a camera crew entered, official, quiet, documenting every frame for the federal record. No news outlet, just the truth, archived for accountability. One of the forensic agents glanced up. "We've found at least 32 items not in the digital system. Half of them match names from previously dismissed civilian complaints." Maria nodded once. It confirmed what she already knew. But confirmation wasn't the goal, exposure was. These weren't lost files. They were buried. And now, they were evidence. Real, visible, undeniable. She looked around the room at the shelves, the boxes, the silence, and understood. This wasn't a locker. It was a graveyard. And today, the dead were being named. The hallway was quieter now. Officers had been moved out, doors propped open, radios muted. The building, once full of noise and dismissiveness, had turned still. Maria stepped out of the evidence room, her badge clipped to her belt, the folder still in her hand. She paused near the break room door, scanning through a list of mismatched evidence tags, when she heard soft footsteps behind her. She didn't turn immediately. The voice came low. "Careful, Marshal James." She looked over her shoulder. It was the rookie, the same one who hadn't laughed, who hadn't moved, who had just watched when it all began. He stood with his hands at his sides, shoulders tense. No body armor, no radio, just his uniform and something in his eyes that didn't belong to someone that young. "I saw something too," he said. Maria nodded slightly, giving him space. He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "It was a traffic stop. 2 weeks ago. Guy had expired plates. Nothing else. They pulled him out anyway. Roughed him up. I asked if it was going in the report, and Sergeant Cooper told me to keep my mouth shut." Maria studied him, not just his words, but the weight they carried. "They told me to drop it," he added. "Said if I wanted to keep my badge, I'd stop asking questions." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver drive. No label, just a red rubber ring around the edge. "I copied the dashcam feed, and some of the internal memos they didn't know I had access to. I wasn't sure who to give it to." He hesitated, then offered it to her, palm open. Maria took it without flinching. "You did the right thing," she said. His shoulders dropped, just a little. "You're not going to put my name in the report, are you? Not unless you want it there." He nodded once, looked down, then back at her. "I didn't know what to do," he said. "But when I saw how they treated you, like you were nothing, I figured maybe I wasn't crazy for thinking something's wrong here." Maria slipped the drive into her inner pocket, sealing it with a quiet zip. "You're not crazy," she said. "You're just awake." The rookie gave a short nod, then turned and walked back down the hall, slower than before. She watched him go. Sometimes truth came from subpoenas. Sometimes it came from a flash drive, handed over in silence. And sometimes, it came from the one officer still willing to stand inside a burning house and say, "This isn't right." The room wasn't large, just a community rec hall, repurposed for press. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Rows of folding chairs faced a simple podium flanked by 2 flags, one slightly frayed at the edge. A microphone crackled once, then fell silent. Maria stood at the front. No blazer, no podium polish. Just a dark sweater, slacks and the badge clipped to her belt. Her hair pulled back the same way it had been that morning. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder. Some scribbled notes. Others held phones aloft, already live. The energy was taut, curiosity laced with something heavier. She didn't tap the mic, didn't clear her throat. She just began. "I didn't come here for justice," she said. "I came here to expose why so many never got it." The room stilled. No applause, just silence and camera shutters. She let the pause sit. "For weeks we've been investigating this precinct quietly, methodically. What we found wasn't just procedural failure. It was cultural. It was targeted. And it was deliberate." She spoke plainly. No emotion, no spin, just facts wrapped in the weight of someone who had walked through the fire with her eyes open. Evidence lockers, with unlogged property. Complaints dismissed without review. Arrests made with no supporting reports. Surveillance turned off when it should have been on. She glanced toward the back of the room. "We recovered 39 pieces of physical evidence tied to civilian complaints that were never filed, and more than a dozen digital logs that show internal warnings ignored. Some from officers who are no longer with us to speak for themselves." One reporter raised a hand. "Marshal James, why did you go in undercover?" Maria looked at him for a long moment. "Because when you walk in wearing the badge," she said, "you get a different story." Murmurs spread across the crowd. Another voice called out, "Were you surprised by what you found?" She shook her head. "No, and that's the problem." The air in the room thickened. She stepped back from the mic for just a breath, then leaned in again, softer this time. This wasn't a sting for headlines. It was a reckoning for the invisible. She looked out, not at the press, but past them, toward the people behind the cameras. The ones who didn't file complaints anymore, because they were tired of watching them disappear. "We don't heal what we won't admit," she said. And today this town admitted it. She stepped away. No smile, no handshake, just the hush of a truth laid bare, and the quiet understanding that justice doesn't always arrive in sirens. Sometimes it walks in through the front door, and waits. By the end of the week, the front desk at the precinct sat unmanned. 3 chairs pushed back, 3 nameplates removed. No goodbye parties. No retirement cake, just silence and locked drawers. Within 48 hours of the press briefing, 3 officers submitted resignations, 1 by email, 1 in person, 1 through a lawyer, 2 more didn't get the chance. Federal indictments came down fast. Charges: obstruction, falsification of records, destruction of evidence. Their badges were collected quietly. No ceremony, no press release. The community watched and remembered. A flood of old complaints poured in. Not new ones, old ones. Names scrawled in faded ink. Incident numbers no longer in the system. But suddenly, people believed they might actually be heard. The DOJ formed a review panel, a 6-person team dedicated solely to examining closed cases from the past 5 years. Patterns emerged. Names repeated. Stories once dismissed as misunderstandings now carried weight. The rookie officer, the one who stepped forward, was reassigned, quietly, safely, transferred to a different department, with a new supervisor and a clean record. He didn't ask for credit. Maria made sure he got protection instead. She stood before a federal board 2 weeks later. No podium this time, just a long wooden table, a row of officials, and a recorder in the corner. Her testimony was calm, detailed, exact, not about feelings, about facts. Policy recommendations followed fast. New reporting structures, mandatory body cam audits, civilian oversight boards with voting power, a digital trail for every file, every stop, every interaction, visible to both supervisors and the public. The precinct still stood. Same walls, same badge on the door, but the silence inside had changed. People still walked past it with suspicion, but now they also walked past it with eyes wide open. The trust was gone, but so was the illusion that nothing could be done. And that, Maria knew, was its own kind of progress. She didn't do interviews, didn't accept awards. When the news vans moved on, and the hashtags faded, she returned to her regular post. Her badge stayed clipped, her voice stayed quiet. But across the department, in precincts that had watched from afar, a new kind of caution had taken root. Not fear, accountability. Because now they knew, someone might be watching, and if they laughed at the wrong person again, they might not realize who she really is, until it's already too late. The floor still creaked in the same places. The overhead lights still flickered once before settling into their buzz. Same walls, same corners, same scent of stale coffee, and cheap disinfectant. Maria walked in without announcement. No blazer, no press, just the same black coat she'd worn the first time she stood at this desk, back when no one looked twice, back when they laughed. Now as she stepped inside, the new officer at the counter stood up immediately. A younger woman, uniform crisp, eyes alert. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just stood and saluted, one hand raised in quiet respect. Maria didn't return it. Not out of pride, not out of coldness. She just kept walking, slow even, focused, her footsteps echoing across the linoleum, like a quiet drumbeat, down the same hall, past the same bulletin board, past the door where the rookie once stood unsure of what to do. She didn't stop, didn't look around. She knew what had changed, and what hadn't. Behind her, the sound of a phone ringing, a new voice answering, more measured, less casual. The desk she passed was clean now. No joke-stained coffee cups, no gum wrappers, just a notepad, a pen, a quiet kind of readiness. She walked until the hallway turned, and the sunlight spilled in from a window near the back exit. There she paused. Not to reflect, to mark it. Because endings don't always come with applause. Sometimes, they just arrive with clarity. And as she stepped through the door, shoulders square, head steady, her voice came softly, not aloud, but layered over the image, as if left behind in the walls themselves. You thought I was just angry. I was, but I was also right. The door clicked shut behind her, and the precinct, once untouched, once untouchable, stood a little quieter, a little more careful, a little less sure of itself, just as it should. If this story moved you, share it, not for the drama, but for the truth it holds. Because there are Marias walking into precincts, boardrooms, classrooms and courtrooms every day, calm, focused, underestimated. Let their silence speak, let their strength be seen, and let their stories remind us all, justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just walks in the front door, and waits. Share this. Tag someone who needs to read it. And never forget, you never know who you're laughing at, until it's too late.